So I'm just setting up my project here. I want to just go over a couple things that I did. So the first thing I did is I went to my Unity Hub, created a new project. I selected 2D, named it, and then I launched it. And then the first thing I did, because I know I'm going to want to use lighting, is I upgraded it to the UDP setup. So I went up to Package Manager. I'll link the video in the top right. I went up to Package Manager. Then I went to Unity Registry here. Scroll down until I found the Universal Rendering Pipeline and installed that. And then there's a couple steps you have to do to get it set up. So I right click, go to Create, then we go Rendering, URP, Pipeline Asset Forward Renderer. When you create that, it's going to create two files. It's going to create this forward renderer data asset and then your Universal Rendering Pipeline asset. You don't have to do anything with these two. You can just leave them on default. Then I right clicked, I went to Create, Rendering, Universal Rendering Pipeline, 2D Renderer, which was this guy. Again, I didn't change any of the settings on this. I just made sure to add right here on this render list my new 2D render data, the one that I just created. I did that by pressing this plus and then assigning it and then making sure it was default. Then the next step is you go up to Edit, Project Settings. You go down to Fit Graphics, and then the Scriptable Renderer Pipeline Settings. I had to make sure to hit this little circle and select my only option from it. And that will set it up so that you have 2D lighting. Now, one thing that threw me off is this little light bulb here. If you have this unchecked and I create a new square, it's going to look lit. But you can see in the game window, it is not lit. That is because of this light bulb. If I turn this on, your scene is going to use lighting effects, or just what you want. So I'm going to make sure that it is on. Then if I right click and go to Light, 2D, Point Light, and I just mess with the settings, you can see that the lighting is working correctly. So that was all the setup that I needed to do there. The one last thing I recommend doing is getting your project on some form of source control. So what I did for that is I went up to Edit, Project Settings, then I went down to Collaborate here, and then it says, I believe it is, there's only one option to select, and that is your organization ID. This is based off of when you set up your Unity account. So I just selected that and went to Next, which brought me to this page right here, and then I just toggled on. After this is on, this gives us access right here to Collaborate. And what we can do here is we can check this all and do like Initial. And this gives us a restore point. So every episode, we're going to push all of our work up to the server. So that way, if we ever need to revert anything or our project gets a bug or something like that, we always have a safe point we can go back to. The only other thing that I will be doing is I'll be making some basic prototype art. I'll include it in the link down below. It's going to be really simple. It's a file that I always prototype with. It's just a bunch of like rectangles and circles, and it's a good thing to start off with. The assets I will be using for this project are these provided by Hippo Games. I'm using in particular the 4-directional character. As you can see, I have purchased quite a few of their things, as I think they make quite excellent work. So we will be going into either at the end of this video or in the next video how to import art from an asset and use art from an asset. It's a pretty straightforward process, but every different asset creator tends to have their own little quirks or differences that tend to require some amount of messing around with to get it to work. I recommend using asset packs like these if art is not your strong point. They do tend to cost a little bit of money, but normally you can get some pretty quality stuff for fairly cheap. Most of these are under 15 bucks. I think they have one $30, which is their mega pack, which is really like 6 of these bundles together. For a top-down game, you have 2 options. You can either do this 4-directional character type stuff, or you can do true top-down like this pack right here. I would recommend going with whatever you prefer. I personally want to kind of mimic the Binding of Isaac's kind of approach, so I will be using the 4D character setup. After you purchase something, the way you set it up in Unity is you just go up to Window, Package Manager, and then after it loads, you're going to want to select this drop down right here and go to My Assets. Do note that you have to be signed into your account in order to see this, and then you can see all the assets you've purchased here. So if I click that 47, it'll load the rest of them. And right here, the Fantasy Heroes 4-direction character editor, you just download it and import it. I do recommend for big kits to do this in a separate project and then take out just the assets you need, which is something that I have done. It should be in my downloads folder. So if I just go to Assets, Import Package, Custom Package, and right here in my downloads folder, I have the packages of the specific ones that I want. So I'm going to just open up this main character bow one, because this is what I'm going to use for my main character. And as you can see, here's a checkbox of all the things that come with it. So I'm going to hit import. There's a ton of things here. Not all of these are going to be used. I'm mainly just after some of the animations and some of the art. A lot of the scripts and that kind of stuff I don't really care about, so I'm not going to use it. And you can see you can delete files and what have you. With this particular asset, and I believe this happens with all of the Hippo assets, at least their character editor ones, we will get this error talking about the Newtonsoft JSON DLL. And the way you address that is you just go to Hero Editor, Common, the Newtonsoft, and then select this DLL file. We need to make sure that we do not exclude platforms. So I'm going to make it happen on any platform. I'm going to make sure nothing's excluded. I'm going to hit apply. Now, sometimes if you already have it installed through another package, so you have to disable one of them. So I'm going to exclude all the options, and then we're going to see if that fixes the error, which it does. I just hit clear to refresh to see if that error was still there. I'm going to hit play, and we should have no compile errors, so play should work. We haven't coded anything. Nothing's going to happen, but that shows that we are set up. And now, if I go to my prefabs folder, I have my main player prefab right here, which you can see I can drag in like this. And now there's some work I have to do. I already have it set up, so I have a whole bunch of animations. One of the main ones I'm going to use here is my charge bow animation. And you can see it shows the different perspectives. But we definitely need to change a bunch of stuff because we don't want 4 copies of our player moving around and so on and so forth. And you can see the shaders for the eyes are not ported for universal rendering pipeline, so we will have to either write our own shaders or modify these shaders, which I will do as a standalone video, not part of this tutorial, as it's outside the scope of this tutorial. But for now, what we can do is just modify it slightly. So I can just select a different shader here. I'm going to use the flare shader for them, and the eyes look a little off colored, but they no longer have that purple sheen to them. And we can proceed with this. We're going to drop a save. We're going to come up here and commit our changes by just hitting all and hitting publish. And then the next thing that we will do is a little bit of coding. We're going to use this to represent the player before we get the art set up, to get this to be able to move up, down, and left and right. All right, we're going to jump into some coding now. So for this, I'm going to use my prototyping 1 as our dummy prototype player, what have you. And we're not going to focus on any animation or any of that stuff quite yet. We're just going to get a basic player movement script set up. So do note that I have set up some things. I have a rigid body 2D attached to it with my gravity scale right here set to 0, as well as I have made a new player movement script in my scripts folder. If you don't have one, just create one by right click, create folder. And I made a new script. And the way you do that again is right click, create C# script. I named mine player movement, and let's jump into it. So your player movement is going to have a couple of things. I will link a video in the top right about variables. But I have a private vector2 move amount. This is going to be a variable that holds how much we want to move and in what direction we want to move in. I've got a private float speed, which is how fast we want to move. And then I've got a reference to my rigid body. I just made it serialized. Another way of doing this is inside of our start function, do this.getComponent, rigid body 2D, helps if I spell it right. And then we set this equal to our rigid body variable. This is just a way to automatically look it up and assign it, as opposed to dragging it in. This is doing this is called caching a variable. What this allows us for is, rather than every time we need to use the variable, we have to look it up in our system memory where it is. We just do it once and we just know, hey, this is my address. I'm going to go right here and get it. So in our update, we create a new vector2 called move input, and this is equal to a new vector2 input.getAccess raw horizontal and input.getAccess raw vertical. So these are two parameters that go into a vector2. What a vector2 is a direction in the x and y axis. Because it takes two axes, that's why we have two parameters. The horizontal is our x-axis, so that's why we're looking at our horizontal axis. And then our y-axis is our vertical axis. I got these by going up to Edit, Project Settings, Input. And you can see on these axes, two of them are already set up for us. That's horizontal and vertical. Horizontal is our left and right buttons, or A and D. And then vertical is our up or down buttons, or S and W. I plug those in. And then we set our move amount equal to our move input.normalized times our speed. So what is the dot normalized part? What the dot normalized part means is that we are limiting the length of our vector to 1. So what that means is we just get a direction, 1 unit in that direction. So if we're holding all the way to our right or pressing the D key, that is going to return a 0 in our Y because we're not moving up and down, and a 1 in our X because we want to move 1 unit to the X. Then we multiply it by our speed. So if our speed is 10, we're moving 10 units in our X direction, which means we will be moving at a speed of 10 to our right. Positive X direction, that is. Once we get our input, so this is where we want to move, right here. That's where we want to move. And then our speed is how fast we want to move there. We then go to our fixed movement because we're going to be using physics to move us. And we're just calling our move position to move from our current position. We're going to add where we want to go and how fast we want to go there. Then we're going to multiply it by time.fixedDeltaTime. What the time.fixedDeltaTime does is makes it average out across fast computers and slow computers so that your speed is consistent. Another way of saying this is a fast computer won't be able to move faster just because it's a fast computer. A slow computer won't move slower just because it's a slow computer. Mathematically, the way it works is the time.fixedDeltaTime is the time between the last frame and the current frame. So if there's a larger gap there, it is multiplied by a larger number, thus it becomes a larger result. If it is smaller, it's multiplied by a smaller number and becomes a smaller result. What this results in is the same speed regardless of your frame rate. I just have to select my object and attach it. Now I have done something wrong here, and that is I have created my art and my code on the same object, and you want to avoid doing that. You always want to have your code and your art separate. So I'm going to make a empty game object called player. I'm going to drag my prototyping to be a child of it. I'm going to make sure it's zeroed out. So I'm going to take my X and hit 0, make that equal to 0, and do the same for my Y. I'm going to remove my two components from it. So this prototyping 1, which I can rename to art, just contains the art. And then I'm going to select my player. And I'm going to add my rigid body 2D to it. And I'm going to add my player movement script. I'm also going to make sure to remember to set my gravity scale to 0 and my speed to something above 0. I'm going to just use 10 for this. Currently, I have a global light set up with an intensity of 1. If I turn it down, you can see that the lighting is affected. I'm going to hit play so we can test it and see how it works. As you can see, W will move us up, S will move us down, D will move us right, A will move us left. This also works for the arrow keys on your keyboard. And this is a not super elegant, but this is a solid basic movement system that we will use. I hope you found this interesting. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons, and I will see you in the next one.